What I'm curious about with your dogs, what kind of dog did you say you're running out of France?
Okay, so let me just sort of run it down because it's kind of confusing. So everybody knows the Brittany, right?
Hmm.
And some people realize that the Brittany used to be called the Brittany Spaniel, but having Spaniel at the end of the in a name for a pointing dog is often confusing because people think of Spaniels as Springers that are flushing dogs.
Hmm.
So you'll even read sometimes you'll read things Brittany Spaniel, the only pointing Spaniel. Well, no, that's wrong. Basically, the word spaniel in French is épagnol, and it's translated to spaniel because it comes from the same word for spaniel, but it really means setter. It really means pointing dog. It means a pointing dog with long hair is what it means in France. So Brittany, the Brittany comes from a province in France called Brittany,
Hmm.
but that's not the only province, and it's not the only one of their épagnols. There are several other provinces. So if you could imagine, Brittany, and then just to the north is a place called Normandy, and then to the north of that is a place called Picardy. And I have a dog from Picardy. It's called a Picardy Spaniel or an Épagnol Picard. And
Hmm.
Picardy is basically north of Paris. It's the northern region of France where World War One happened. Picardy is an amazing place. It's kind of rolling hills. It looks like rural Minnesota, rural Wisconsin, kind of in certain areas. And it's got lots of lakes and ponds and swamps, and they hunt a lot of ducks and woodcock and their version of grouse or partridges. But it is littered, every roadside has 100 graveyards along it as you're driving through, because that's basically where World War One happened.
Hmm.
And so that breed, which is a fantastic breed, well, they were decimated by two world wars. So it's not like they were super popular to begin with, and then they kind of almost got wiped out. But to this day, they still breed them there, and they're an all-round dog. The average French hunter in Picardy, he wants his dog to run around real fast, kind of far. He wants him to slam point. He wants it to, wait till you get there, you shoot the bird and fetch that bird. If it falls in water, he wants it to go in water and fetch it. So basically exactly the kind of dog I want.
Hmm.
And they would never even, they wouldn't breed a dog if it wanted to, chase porcupines or that's not what they do. They have other breeds for that. The French are hardcore hunters, and they have all kinds of different hunting breeds. But they have different breeds for different things. And they're bird dogs. Basically, they run, they hunt, they point, they fetch.
I mean, it's it's so it's so simple in some ways. I mean,
Yes.
when you say, if you were to just look at the reason you ended up with that breed, if I looked at that on paper, I'd be like, this makes total sense. But to
Yeah.
hear the story, I mean, it's kind of wild, and it's really interesting, and it makes me like kind of hyper cognizant of how insulated we are, just wherever you're kind of from and whatever your exposure is to bird dogs and hunting situations, and to realize how much is out there. And I love the parallel of choosing a dog from a landscape over there
Yeah.
that resembles your own. And I'm always
Yeah.
curious about that. I just went through this with a buddy of mine whose father-in-law is he ordered up a new British lab from down in Florida, but he lives in
Mm.
Colorado. And
Right.
I'm always, I'm sure he'll get a great dog out of that, but I'm always thinking like, man, just personally, I'm like, would I want a dog living in Minnesota, knowing what I know? Would I want a dog that's been bred for generations in Florida? And I
Yeah.
know there's people listening like it wouldn't make a difference, but I feel like it might.
Yeah, and it comes just it goes even beyond just sort of how they've been bred in terms of their physical attributes and what they sort of are expected to do. It comes down to how the dogs are genetically wired. And let me give you an example. And it comes down to, like, for instance, in training them or even just living with them. So let me give you an example. When I had Weimaraners, I had short hairs and short haired and long haired Weimaraners. And my Weimaraners, the long haired ones, I imported from Germany. My short haired ones were from field trial lines in the U.S. But my German imports come from a breeder, and she's bred probably 50 litters over the last 40 years or 30 years, like one of the top breeders there. And she, with every single litter that she breeds maybe one litter to a year. And for every one of her litters, she invites the owners of those litters to come to her place for the first year of those dogs' life every Sunday for training purposes, because she has a training club and she has all the stuff that they want to train. And then they go out for their organized hunts every fall. And so some of those people are on their third or fourth dog with her, from her, and have gone to probably 100 different training classes with her. the Germans expect that when they breed a dog and when those pups are born, that those dogs are going to start training from day one and will more or less be in training for the first 4 or 5 years of their lives, and then have to follow that training for the rest of their lives. It's almost as if, a couple has a young child, a son or a daughter, and decides that daughter, son or daughter, is going to be a doctor when it grows up, and basically starts from day one, which is, fine. It's great. Good thing we have good doctors. So what ends up happening, you multiply that by, how many different breeds, how many different breeders, and 150 years, and you end up with a gene pool of dogs that are hardwired to be trained, that want to be trained, that love to be trained. My God, I still have one of my long-haired Weimaraners. He's 12 years old, 13. He'll be 13 next month. And that dog looks at you, and his number 2 priority is let's go hunt. His number 1 priority is tell me what to do. Yeah. Basically, he is hardwired to focus on me, and I could probably make, if I were even a half decent trainer, which I'm not, I'm a terrible trainer. If I was half decent, I could make that into a circus dog. I could make that dog jump through flaming hoops, and do whatever he wants, because that's where they come from. And which is great. And a lot of people like that. And a lot of people want that. And that's what I admire about a lot of these. I see somebody putting a versatile championship on their dog at NAVT, and I'm like, oh my God, it's just, they're like superstars to me. They really are. I really admire that. But I also know, as I mentioned earlier, what my weaknesses are. And I suck at training. And I live in a province where we don't have a NAVTA chapter. I live in a province that is the size of Texas. It has 1 million people in it. They all live in one city. And the number of bird hunters with pointing dogs, I can count on one hand. All right. So there's nothing around me to help train a dog. There's no organized every Sunday, let's go train our dogs. There's no breeders helping us out. I'm on my own up here. So now if we switch over to the French breeds, I'm up in Picardy. I'm talking to these Picardy hunters, and I ask them about, okay, so what's your training program? They're like, what now? I said, yeah, what's your training program? They're like, well, I take my gun and I go to the field and I let my dog out. When he points, I shoot a bird and he fetches it to me. And I'm like, what? So the French attitude to hunting or to training their dogs is either some of them will sort of employ a pro trainer if they want to go in field trials, but your basic dude that's been breeding dogs for 30 years, that has, he breeds his dog to his neighbor's dog because they're both real good dogs. They both live in the same area. And they just go out and hunt with their dogs. They shut up and they let the birds teach the dogs. And I'm thinking, all right, not only does this place look like it looks like up here, not only do they hunt the same way, but they kind of train like I do. They basically take their dog out. So the Germans want a dog that out of the womb is ready and willing to be trained. The French breed dogs so that out of the womb, that dog is going to train itself. Now, are you going to put a VC on one of those French dogs? Maybe. But they might not be able to take the pressure. Maybe, if you're really into training and you're really into fast training, you want a 1.5-year-old dog that's going to put a, UT1 or a VC or be a field trial champion. I wouldn't recommend one of these dogs. They're slow to develop. They're a little bit mellower. Sometimes pushing them is like trying to play pool with a rope. Like you can't, everything has to be fun. But if you're like me, and if your whole training system and your whole attitude towards hunting is let's just go out and hunt, I can't think of a better dog. The latest one that we got, he's almost 4 now. He just turned 4. I've never trained him. He's never had a day of formal training in his life.
So no obedience training?
Well, come sit, stay here, heel. Yeah, for sure. Around the house and in the yard. Yeah, for sure. He's not going to go crap on the carpet. I mean, he's a well-behaved dog. But in terms of hunting, no. Since day one, all I've done with him is take him out. Again, I'm in an empty province with not a lot of people, not a lot of resources for training dogs, but I do have birds. We do have wild birds up here, which is fortunate. So that's all I do. I take him out. If he points, I shoot. He fetches, brings it to me. Good boy. And just, rinse and repeat. And so is he going to be a VC dog? Could I put a UT1 on him? Maybe if I was a half decent trainer, but that's not what I want to do. And so he was the second one we brought into North America. We're up to about 100 now. And every one of those dogs, 90% of them are in the hands of hunters. And they've all gone to hunters like me. Guys that are not super ambitious to go to the top of the heap and win gold medals. They're just guys that want an easy to live with dog, that want an easy to train dog, that all they need to do is take it out, hunt with it, and it's going to train itself.
Mm-hmm. It sounds pretty amazing.
Well, yeah.
And I know you're going to get some emails after this and people are going to be like, where can I get one of those?
Yeah. Well, see, there's a couple of things. First of all, we are promoting the breed, but what we're trying to do is be very careful with it. We're not seeking, for instance, AKC recognition. The breed is not recognized by the AKC or the Canadian Kennel Club, so you can't show it, which to our mind is a good thing, because we don't want people who are non-hunters, who are show breeders only, to get into the breed. We want it to remain outside of the mainstream. It's registerable with NAVDA, and you can test it, and you can even field trial it in certain UKC and FDSB trials. But we want to go slow, and we want to make sure that it stays kind of like it is in its home country, just basically a dog that's bred by hunters for hunters. That's it. I'm also probably going to get an email or comments saying, "Oh, it sounds too good to be true." They're not. No. I'm not saying these are perfect dogs for everyone. They're perfect dogs for guys like me. They, again, if you are a hardcore field trialer and you want, a 12 o'clock tail and a dog that's just busting the horizon and slamming his birds, and you're going to want to win trials with it, yeah, look to a different breed. More power to you. Mm-hmm. I'll direct you to some of the best lines of pointers or setters or GSPs you want to know. Same thing. If you want a dog because you're in an area where you can blood track, or where you can't, or where you do want to do vermin control, or you're into the German system, yeah, get one of those dogs. They're awesome. Mm-hmm. There is an awesome dog for everybody, but everybody's awesome dog isn't the same dog. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'm just fortunate that I found the awesome dog for me. I found the breed for me, which is great. I'm in love with it, and I'm really promoting the French breeds because they're all a lot alike. Actually, there's various short-haired breeds. They're called Bracks, and there are various long-haired breeds that are called Spaniel or Spaniels, and they're kind of catching on as a little bit of a niche market here in North America, and people are really enjoying them.
Yep. I had to dig into, I think it was Brock d'Auvergne's at one point.
Yep. Brock d'Auvergne. Yep.
Is that how they say it? It was for a gun dog assignment a long time ago. Yeah, there's some awareness of that. And there's just, I think what I love about this conversation is it's an interesting story about how you found your dog. But it's just a better lesson for everyone that you're right. There is a dog out there for you. There's a dog that's going to be the kind of dog you want at home and in the field. And the thing that I see a lot, which I'm not really wired for this, but people get super married to the first kind of dog they get. So if you got a golden retriever when you were a 10-year-old and that was your family dog, you see those people, sometimes they have golden retrievers their entire life, not paying attention to, you mentioned the show breeding and not paying attention to all the health issues that might show up or anything like that. And using that sort of as, and I'm not saying you do whatever you want with dogs, but when you get locked into something like that, you're closing off an awful lot of opportunities to yourself. And so just being more open to potential breeds and the kind of breeding that might be into this dog versus that dog, or like you said, which you've mentioned with a couple different breeds, is the history of those breeds and what they were used for. Because you can't deny generations upon generations upon generations of specific tasks and, genetic situation where they're being asked to do something, and you get this dog and you ask it to do something totally different than every generation's been asked for 150 years.
Yes. Yeah. And that was one of the conclusions. I spent a lot of time traveling all throughout Europe and looking at these different dog breeds, and I didn't believe it. I didn't really think about it much at first, but it sort of dawned on me after a little while that dogs really are a reflection of the culture that they are bred in. They really are. English dogs are very English, and French dogs are very French, and German dogs are very German. We modify them here in North America. Just, you and I are speaking English, but we're speaking it with a North American accent. We don't speak like they do in London, right? Mm-hmm. Or in Australia. So there are differences regionally, but dogs really do, sort of come from the culture that they're from. And I think it's interesting if we're open-minded enough that our dogs can lead us to a deeper understanding of our own culture and the cultures of others. And that, I think, is sort of one of the greatest sort of joys or benefits of what I've done. And it was something completely unplanned. I didn't really plan on that happening, but it ended up happening, and it really opened my mind. So as I would travel through Europe, of course, the only other people I was meeting were hunters with dogs. It was almost as if we were long lost cousins. You had an instant relationship with this guy, even though you could barely speak his language. That went back centuries, because we're both hunters and we're both like into dogs. So we formed very fast and in some cases very profound relationships with people over there. And so naturally, being I don't know, I guess it's a Canadian thing. We always invite people. Yeah, lots of room. Come on over. Come and hunt with us. And some of them were crazy enough to do it. And so over the years, I've had people from various countries in Europe come and hunt here, and I've hunted over there. And people ask me, oh, man, it must be great. And yeah, it is. It's great to hunt in Germany. It's great to watch field trials in the moors of northern England and, and hunt in Spain and places like that. You know what's even better? Is having people from there come and hunt on my own territory so I can see my lands and my sort of situation through their eyes. Mm-hmm. Because I used to take it for granted, man. I used to think, you're in northern Minnesota. You probably grew up where you want to hunt. You get in the car, you throw your gun and you throw your dog and you go and you hunt. Like, there's no big ritual to it. There's no big, you're not paying, for this, or you're not jumping through a bunch of hoops. I thought everybody hunted like that in Manitoba, or like I do in Manitoba. I thought everybody hunted like that. Now, they hunt in a lot of different ways, and it has its pluses and minuses everywhere around the world. But to actually have these people and see their eyeballs just about pop out of their head when they see where they're going, and this was the stuff that just I took for granted as a young man. I would just, this is normal. Well, it's not normal. We are rich. We are, absolutely blessed for what we have, and it's something that I encourage other people. So again, coming back to that whole discussion about, where to get a dog from, and get a dog locally if it suits you. If not, sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes it's worth that extra step, that little extra effort, because what it's going to do is it's going to force you out of your comfort zone. It's going to force you to go and learn other cultures. And hopefully it's going to open your mind to various different ways. Last example I'll give you is snipe. Now, you're in Minnesota. You must see snipe in the duck blinds once in a while. They're zipping around, whatever. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of snipe up here, and they're oftentimes in hay pastures. So we're a flat country here, and in order to get to the marsh where you're going to hunt ducks, you park your car maybe a mile or two away, and you got to cross sometimes flooded hay fields to get to the marsh. Well, on your way there, you're going to pop up sometimes a half a dozen, sometimes 200 snipe. And my entire life, I ignored them. They are a perfectly legal game bird here in Manitoba. Mm-hmm. But my entire life, I ignored them because I thought, well, with this same shotgun shell, I could, shoot a goose. Why would I shoot such a, tiny little bird? Yep. Until maybe, 10, 12 years ago, a friend of mine from France came over to Manitoba to hunt with us. And as we were walking through that hayfield, dozens of snipe were getting up. And this guy almost had a seizure because, for him to see more than a dozen snipe in a year is a big thing. Yeah. For him to shoot half a dozen of them is a big thing. And we were seeing literally hundreds of them. And he said, Craig, we have to shoot these. He had really good setters. And they were pointing these birds. And I thought, okay, this is great. Pointing birds, let's shoot them. So we shot a couple, brought them home that night, cleaned them, and he showed me how to cook them the French way. I'll tell you what, man, I had 2 bites out of those birds, and I was an instant snipe hunter. And to this day, snipe is now my favorite bird to hunt. So we specifically target snipe. We find fields where our dogs can work them and point them. And it really changed the way I approach hunting. It really has. I mean, I will spend more days snipe hunting than I will hunting sharp-tailed grouse. Wow. Just because they are a super challenging bird to shoot. They're very hard for the dogs to handle. You need good dogs to handle snipe. Snipe will divide the men from the boys in terms of the dogs out in the field. They will fool a lot of dogs. And they're hard to hit, and they're delicious on the plate. And they're abundant. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, in fact, I'm looking out my window right now. We've got 4 feet of snow. It's minus 30. And I'm thinking, you know what? They're still hunting snipe in January in Florida. Yep. So I'm planning a trip to Florida next year. I want to go snipe hunting down there.